You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Welcome to the Boss Hog of Liberty podcast on the We Are Libertarians Network. I am your host, Jeremiah Morrell, and as always, I'm joined by our co-host, Dakota Davis.
What's up?
Our show is about our lives in rural Indiana. It's a show about our folks who are involved in politics. We promise that our episodes are going to be a fun and an easy listen. We interview people who are influencers, elected officials, political experts, and people that we just find interesting. Across the way, we have Kade Koger returning again as co-host.
Good evening.
Welcome, Kade. You're reporting some late-breaking news at the end of the show here. We sent you, we're like a real news show. We sent you as an embedded reporter to the county courthouse, and now we're going to have a report from me at the end on the Henry County Planning Commission and a little thing you served on. On the other side of the room, we have a longtime friend of mine and the Libertarian movement in Indiana. Mr. Andy Horning is here. Welcome, Andy.
That's good to be here.
You are a many-time candidate for office. I've voted. I can't tell you. I've probably voted for you more times than I have on my left hand.
Yeah. Well, the term that's most commonly bandied about is perennial candidate, but we all know what that really means to a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Dan Burton was a perennial candidate too.
Yeah. So, of course, anybody who gets reelected 100 times is a perennial candidate. We just don't call them that unless they lose.
It's unfair.
It is unfair.
I don't want to brag, but I've already lost twice.
Yeah, well, so you're a perennial candidate.
That's right. I haven't run for the same office a couple of times, but I mean, we'll see how it goes. So a little weekend recap here. We like to just chat amongst ourselves for a few minutes and set the tone before we get to the Stephen Colbert gotcha questions. Dakota knows that's not true. No. Boss Hog of Liberty has had some success this week. We're up to over 500 Facebook likes.
I just checked it whenever we were going live, and it was at 541 likes on Facebook.
That's awesome.
I'm pushing to get to over 600 by the end of the weekend.
There we go.
So everybody needs to go onto our page and share the page so that we can get as many likes on there as what we can.
That's how we grow. It is by getting people to like and share.
Yeah, Facebook is huge in our growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the Facebook video especially drives it. Where when we go live and we have somebody like Andy on who has a reach and an audience, there people tune in and. Heck, there's already a dozen people watching the Facebook Live, and we've been on the air for about a minute.
I should have put something on my page about me being here tonight. I guess, as we already discussed, my standard policy is to blame Steve over there.
Yeah, Steve, your campaign manager and driver. I assume Steve's your driver. Steve is over in the corner.
We didn't do that right either.
No, honestly, when I was Rex Bell's campaign manager, my job was to sit in the passenger seat and keep Rex company. Huh. So that's kind of the way it went.
All right, he did that. Fine. Yeah.
Rex kind of strikes me as the type of guy that just enjoys driving, though.
The only time you'll get a kick out of this, the only time that I drove during the entire campaign was our debate we had in Evansville at the University of Southern Indiana, and we arrived in the campaign Tahoe. We had a special parking space that was where each candidate had one. So he was candidate Bell. They had a parking cone with his name on it. It was misspelled ball. So
wait a second.
So, Bell versus ball, and so I ran it over with the Tahoe and took a little picture. I didn't mean to. I just had a little depth perception problem.
Huh. Okay, so we know why Rex did the driving then. Perhaps.
Yeah, generally, yeah. Okay. I bought the Tahoe later, so I mean it's I feel like I'm pretty good with it now.
Okay, good.
So yeah, we got up to 500 Facebook likes this week, up trending towards 600 now. And another big thing was accomplished, Kade, in the war for freedom in Henry County, Indiana.
Yeah.
The Citizens of Henry County group, which we've talked about all the time. There's over 6,000 members in there, and it's a big part of our following locally. There was a little activism that took place, and I think you started this probably 2 months ago, complaining that you don't want to be in a Facebook group that you're not allowed to share memes or GIFs in.
Yeah.
And so we all
from there, I started radicalizing people.
Yes, and so we picked up our internet pitchforks and starting talking to moderators and pointing out the ridiculousness, that you'll get a theme here as the way we operate, Andy. Over the weekend, the moderators reconsidered, and now there's a little bit more freedom in the world, Dakota.
Yep. There is. If you saw my Facebook post, we had a picture of me acting like Patrick Henry. It was my face actually pasted onto Patrick Henry's body.
You look so similar.
Yeah. And he's holding up his articles, and he, the "Give me liberty or give me death," and my caption was "Give me gifts or give me death, citizens of Henry County."
So we won that little piece of freedom this week.
We did,
and now we have the distinct honor of having Andy Horning, who's running for U.S. Senate across the entire state of Indiana.
The whole state.
92 counties.
Yeah, 92 counties.
9 congressional districts.
I see where you're going with this.
Tell me now that you've run as a Libertarian before, and now you're running on the Republican ticket. Mm-hmm. So their process is a little bit different. You have to go through. When I ran for office as a Libertarian, I needed 2 signatures. I needed the state chairman and I think the treasurer. How many do you need?
4,500 at the minimum, but see, here's the trick. It's not even just signatures you're gathering. You're getting their date of birth, you're getting their address, and their signature. So, you're asking people to spend a little bit of time on this form and give up information that a lot of freedom-loving people are not real free with.
Right.
And then you have to get them to put that on a form that then goes back to their home county and gets approved by their county courthouse.
Correct. So they get tallied at the county level. So there are a bunch of counties in Indiana. It's the 4,500 is 500 per district per congressional district.
So you can't just go to Indianapolis and stand on the street corner and get the 10,000 signatures and be good.
Nope. And it's not just signatures. Like I said, if it was just signatures, then it would be easy. But it's not. And so people actually have to spend, it usually works out. You have to spend about a minute, just standing there. In cold weather, as it turns out, lately.
Really got screwed on that one.
I've actually been thinking of running for Senate of Tahiti. But,
Puerto Rico could use a senator.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's a challenge, and a lot of people don't make it. In fact, even at the presidential level, actually, one of our senators didn't make it.
497 is close enough if you start as a U.S. congressman.
Yeah, and so that's just it. Am I going to be able to get away with what the other guys get away with? Probably not. So, we're going to have our T's crossed and our I's dotted. But.
So before we go too much further, I desperately want to see you make the ballot. Okay. Mm-hmm. How do people do that? If they want to get involved or if they want to sign or try to get signatures, how do we do that?
We actually have a form that I've got posted from on the front page of my website, which is Horning for Indiana with a number 4. So Horning for Indiana.
See, now you can't run for Tahiti because you've already got the domain Horning for Indiana.
I know. Well, I could be for Indiana from Tahiti, but no. I'm a Hoosier, born and raised. So anyway, on that page, you've got a link that'll take you to a sign-up page. It just asks, what county are you in and how many signatures you think you can get, that kind of thing. But mostly it gets us in touch with the guy who's managing this process. And so Jamie Werner is the guy who's running this. He's doing a great job, but it is a big job. And so we need all the people we can get to help us with it because, it's 4,500. When I first heard this, some years ago, I thought, well, it doesn't seem so bad. But, actually trying to collect it is a different matter. And where you had Hillary and Obama fail to do it in Indiana, and you had a senator, who was a congressman before, fail to do it here in Indiana, it is tough. It's tough to do. So it's a significant hurdle, and I could use all the help I can get.
Well, obviously, from the Libertarian side, we've always been pleading for easier ballot access across the board, and that applies for the Republican and Democrat parties as well, the major parties in Indiana.
And I tried to take it to court. So I've tried to fight that fight for years and years and years.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your history for people that are just now tuning in and learning. We have listenership all over Indiana. We obviously have a strong focus in East Central Indiana, where Liberty views have been well received. But we have people all over the state of Indiana that listen. So you've run for Congress. You've run. I know last cycle you ran in the 8th district, I guess.
8th district
against Dr. Bouchon. or in that race.
Yeah,
yes.
I don't
not against.
Yeah, I don't run against these guys. If it was me versus him, I could take him in a fair fight easy. So it's not. No.
I understand. All right, so I will rephrase. In the same race that's currently occupied by Dr. Basham.
We were all applying for the same job.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then you ran in the 7th congressional district, and when you lived in Indianapolis at one point, you left the urban lifestyle, and now you live in Freedom, Indiana, down in Owen County. So you've run there. I first became aware of you, I guess, probably. I would say it was a race for governor, and it was. Did you run twice for governor of Indiana? Yeah. So it was the first time. It was the first time, and then I actually got to meet you the second time when I had become involved in Indiana politics. But, I guess that was probably 12 or 14 years ago that you ran for governor the first time.
Actually, it was 2000. It
was 2000. Yeah. Oh, my God. 18 years. My God. Yeah. You've gotten older since I saw you on TV, but it wasn't high definition back then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a matter of time. It'll happen to you, too.
Yeah. Well, I understand. So it's happening now. We're going through wedding planning. I'm getting married in July, and I know, yeah, everybody's as shocked as I am. So yeah, that's going to age me. We better not go there. So tell me about the process. You as you've run these races before, what in the world got you thinking that you wanted to do this again? Because I know we've been through this is the last time, or this is, probably not running again.
This is a difficult one for me to explain because I really do hate politics, and I get nervous speaking in front of groups of people. There's nothing about me really that's quite correct with politics. And yet, it always comes down to the same sort of thing. I see the slate of options that were presented, and everybody says this. Everybody says, well, you can always run for yourself if you don't like who's on the ballot. But how many people actually do that? And so when it comes to having a constitutional option, how many have there really been in Indiana for any level of public office? You just don't get that many people who just want to do the law as written, make things simple, make government go legit. It's a fairly simple thing that I'm asking for. I just want our government to be governed.
So at the federal level, who are some examples of people that you think are doing it the right way?
There are basically three. Out of 535, that's not too bad. Three. You got Thomas Massey, Justin Amash, and I think to a very large degree Rand Paul.
So you basically, the best chances of you agreeing with somebody as a congressman is to be within 200 miles of your house, whether in southern Michigan or northern Kentucky. That's that seems to be.
That's it.
You have to be close by. So you will, if you are elected, you'll be like this little cluster. You'll be the uniter between Kentucky and Michigan.
Yeah, and that's where I think on one hand we will have plenty to go out to lunch about and discuss. On the other hand, there are an awful lot of people in Congress who are unfairly divided against themselves, where there really is a lot of common ground that nobody's really even touching. Because Democrats and Republicans all have their favorite parts of the Constitution. And, when I ran as a Libertarian, people were always asking, who would you caucus with if you got elected? And I've always thought that was a really dumb question because, we liberty-minded people, constitutionalist-minded people have we own the common ground.
Right.
And most people now agree with most of our issues. So in terms of ideology, we've kind of already won the argument, and it's really just a matter of getting people to vote the way they talk. So really, I would have more in common with more people in Washington, D.C. on more issues than most of those guys there, because they are very polarized in a very tribal, kind of ideologically nonsensical way.
And that's something you've talked about an awful lot, is just the tribalism that we get into with all politics. Because this guy has a D next to his name, I can't consider voting for him.
It's all right or all wrong. Our guy is all right and your guy is all wrong. And that's nuts. That doesn't ever work out like that. And when you idolize somebody unfairly, you're setting yourself up for a fall. And when you demonize somebody unfairly, you're losing potential allies.
So last night I looked, you retweeted something from Representative Massey, basically, and I assume this is your position as well, criticizing the fact that there was a federal tax cut last month, and now they're going to agree to just blindly increase spending. They're going to raise the debt ceiling or shut down the government in 30 hours from the time we're recording this.
Yeah.
I'm sure that by the time this podcast gets up and you're driving in your car on Saturday morning, we've magically found more money for the federal government and everything's still happening, and you can still go visit Mount Rushmore.
The line is that the tax cut is going to increase growth, and that the growth is going to drive more tax revenue, and that somehow all of this will magically work out. And that Laffer curve idea does have some merit to it, and at least in the short term, it might turn out kind of okay. But when people are talking about infrastructure, and making roads that work and bridges that work and all of that thing, we never think about the infrastructure of we actually have a continuum of economics and time that we can look at and see that bridges wear out over time. Money systems wear out over time. Political systems wear out over time. Human civilizations have a 100% failure rate, and it's always by the same sort of pattern. And if we don't get wise to that and see that we are on an unsustainable course, we have all kinds of, political infrastructure deteriorating under debt and under war and under all kinds of just, the usual things that take down a country. And you don't even have to look back to ancient Rome. You can look anywhere in the past 100 years. You have places all around the globe where they've done the same thing and it ended the same way. And when are we going to get that, it doesn't have to, we don't have to crash on our watch. We can fix this. And it's a fairly simple thing. If we just do the law, which was proven to work better than anything anybody else has ever tried, I'm okay with that. I don't like everything in the Constitution. I'm not okay with every single word of it. There's some stuff that's problematic, but it's an agreement. It's a deal. It's a compromise.
If you'll agree to everything else, you'll accept the 16th Amendment as law?
I'm okay with all of this stuff as written. 14th Amendment, 16th Amendment, whichever parts you find offensive. I'm okay with all of that if we just go legit. But the idea of suspending all of that and not having any sort of restraints on governing power and not having any restraints on the authority of government or the spending of government, where it's not going to last much longer.
Fair enough. So Dakota, you put together a handful of different numbers and results for us. In your past runs, Andy, you ran, I guess in 2012, you did run for the Senate seat. Mm-hmm. You were on the stage. My parents, I think, were in the front row with you at the infamous.
Say hi to them.
That's right, Mom and Dad. Hi to the wife and kids at home.
Hi.
The Scott Pruitt, the race car driver line. That one's for Zach Burcham, who's watching live. There's this race car driver, Scott Pruitt, ran the Indy 500. He did sports cars and all that. And every time he'd get interviewed, he'd wave and hi to the wife and kids at home. So that's just basically just for that one listener, or Scott Pruitt if he happens to be listening. Running in his final race, the 24 Hours of Daytona, this later next month.
Wow. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but we do actually have sort of a yard sign for you hanging up in the studio.
Yeah.
It's the biggest yard sign that's in here.
And it's an Andy Horning drawing. It's by his right hand or left hand.
That was my right hand.
The good one.
Yeah.
I'll have to post a picture of it whenever we post the link to this this episode. But it's actually right behind Kade, and it's a picture of the Statue of Liberty holding up by the tails a donkey and an elephant, and it says, "Isn't it about time to vote Libertarian?" That's pretty good. That's actually like my favorite. It's my favorite yard sign that's hanging up in here because
it's just dangerous pop art.
It's original. Yeah.
Well, I didn't quite make it to the Banksy level of fame for that, but yeah, it's been around.
So so you did run for the seat in 2012, and you obviously were on the ballot statewide, and you got nearly 6% of the vote, just a massive total, 145,000 people.
Which, if all of those people were to vote for me in the primary. And then, we still would need some. But in a crowded field, I think, my math seems pretty good. Much better than it has been. Let's not talk about that too much. But, yeah, the odds and statistics are in my favor, I think.
Yeah. So in this, I guess there's another big announcement as well. Americans for Prosperity is hosting a debate, and I believe that I read that you are going to be included in that.
I will.
So Justin Stevens is with that group, and he sat in this chair probably 2 months ago and appeared with us and talked about a number of different things. So you and the entire field are going to be included in a debate. Is it going to be at WIBC or 93.1? One of the I think I read that. Be prepared. I think you're going on the radio.
Okay, I can do that.
So that's coming up, and you've got there are, I guess, 3 very well-financed candidates in the race, and then a couple of others as well, right? So,
and then
a couple others.
We're talking decimal place differences. Yeah,
we've been interviewing candidates in a series on the 6th congressional district, because that's what we're in, and Representative Messer is trying to move up. So we had a field of about 5 people running in that race. Very early on, we had Jonathan Lamb on, who I think you've met, and Jonathan called Greg Pence the 900-pound gorilla, and we've called him that throughout the entire race.
Yeah,
because and just his presence in the race has driven away all but 2 of the other candidates, because it's tough. When you're looking at somebody that potentially can raise the kind of money that they expect the vice president's brother to be able to raise, or 2 sitting members of Congress, it's a heavy lift.
But that's what's so embarrassing about all of this. I mean, just looking at it from maybe I can't extricate myself from my own perspective as a candidate and a liberty-loving guy and all of that. But at what point are we going to take accountability for the fact that this government is ours? We voted for it. We keep reelecting people. This 98% reelection rate of the U.S. House of Representatives in the last election, and yet people thought that this last election was this big revolution and that we're voting in Donald Trump. What a statement that makes, that we're so different and things are going to change now. 98% of the U.S. House Representatives. And so what I guess
compared to the approval rating of Congress.
Yes, which goes down into single digits.
Funny. Yeah.
Well, there was actually, as the approval rating went down, the reelection rate actually went up. And so what I find frustrating about all of this stuff is that we have some candidates who've already proven their bona fides when it comes to Republican policy. They've increased the size of government. They've increased, let's just look at it just numerically speaking. Since 2010, we've increased the debt, national debt, 50%.
Yeah, we were about 10 or 12 trillion. Or wait, is it trillion? I don't even know the number.
It's trillion.
Yeah.
That's 12 zeros.
Yeah,
it's
insane.
That's a huge number. So when you're talking about increasing the national debt by that much, when you've got the keys to government, so I mean, just to kind of refresh where we are right now, you've got the president. We really kind of have the Supreme Court on our side. We've got both houses, and yet where have all of these promises gone? The Republican Party says we're about this and this and this, and you have people like Obama who just used an executive order to say, well, constitutionally speaking, I'm going to nullify DOMA, and he did it. And so you've got the precedent is that you have presidents and congressmen and other people who nullify laws all the time. They nullify the Constitution all the time. Where are the Republicans in this? Right. When are they going to start living up to their rhetoric?
Who campaign about smaller government, less spending, reducing the national debt. It's kind of like we talk about it because we deal so much with local issues. As our Indiana legislature that's passing all these additional regulations, these new laws. Imposing new taxes, but they all campaign on the same promises of reducing taxes, reducing spending, letting people live their lives. And I think that people are starting to realize that's not what's happening whenever we elect Republicans.
I keep hoping.
Right, yeah.
But, the difference here really comes down to a pretty simple human phenomenon where you don't want to think that you're the one screwing up. Your neighbors are all stupid. I mean, all those people are making bad choices in the voting booth. They're electing the wrong people. I'm the only guy who's doing this right. So you're going to, make unfair, you're going to give passes to the people that you elected. And that's just human. It's a shame. It's a shame that going back to what I said before about idolizing some people and demonizing others, that's the same phenomenon of like idolatry and tribalism where your guy is good. Everybody else is bad. And that's, we don't see that phenomenon extrapolates out across the whole country into a really bad government right now.
435 congressional districts with a good guy. According to them,
yeah. Well,
or they get to draw their own districts, which is something that each state has to address on their own. We don't, that's not something we can do from the federal level.
Well, let's just kind of, maybe I'm going to finally answer the question you asked, before about, why do I keep doing this? Why am I running again? And I'm looking at the slate of options on the Republican ticket, and nothing against them personally, because they've got supporters, and I don't want to say anything, negative about those people that, have their own opinions and such. But the slate of options are some very fine people who want to do more stuff with government, and they don't want to do the Constitution. They don't. And so, you've got the two front runners. Well, one of these is the Beat the Elite candidate who had a fundraiser in California with, I can't remember, it's $10,000 a plate or something like that. How
much is an Andy Horning fundraiser?
I'll take $1. So you're looking at, these guys who've been in the swamp. They have been the swamp. And then you've got another guy who says he's an outsider, but he was already a legislator and already voted to increase the size and cost and taxes of government.
That's been a recurring theme with all of these different congressional candidates that we talk to. It's always, and I think it has a lot to do with Donald Trump being elected. It's always, political outsider. I'm a political outsider.
I don't think I have ever billed myself that way, even though, I think
right.
Dang it. If anybody's an outsider. But let's look at this in another way. They like to say they're not politicians. Mm-hmm. But that's using a definition of politician that we really ought to reject. I mean, being a politician shouldn't be a nasty thing that you're afraid to say you're doing it. I would like to be a politician. I'm applying for a job to be a politician, and I want to make that label mean something good.
Right. Exactly. I couldn't agree more with that. That's a great way to put it.
And I would like to be an insider.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm applying. That's the other kind of ridiculous thing. What are you guys applying for? Yeah. Are you actually applying for the job of a U.S. senator and saying that you're an outsider? No. Just to get here. Just to get through the signatures, just to get all of this fundraising done, to be in a party of insiders.
You have to navigate.
And you've got to know a lot of insiders. And so as arguably one, I know I'm at least one of the two. There are two of us who I think are pretty close, being equal outsiders. But I know an awful lot of insiders. I've been around this enough that I'm not going to claim that I'm like this.
You're not a novice.
I'm not a novice. I'm not somebody who disclaims the idea of being a politician or being an insider. It's just we have to look these things in the face for what they are. There is corruption going on in this election. Most of the money that's going to be raised in this, and we're talking $100 million for this race, probably at least, it's going to be coming largely from outside the state of Indiana. And when you're looking to see what these people are expecting out of their investment, they're expecting to get their money back many times over. And, the facts seem to indicate that there isn't another investment you could make that's as good. I mean, you could buy Bitcoin when it was 30 cents, and it's still not going to be the same thing as, buying a congressman for $1 million. Because you get billions back. You get special contracts. Your life gets better. I know you guys probably remember when Microsoft was just about to get devoured.
That's right.
And they ended up saying, well, we guess we have to get some lobbyists. Now they're fine. So this game is absurd, and all of us know it's corrupt. All of us. We all know this is about special deals for special people, and you buy your way in and you get your way. And that's nuts that we keep voting for it.
Yep. It's just kind of what we accept. Kade, as you're looking at this field, I would imagine you probably are inclined to vote in the Republican primary in May, so you'd be our token undecided voter. When you're looking for a Senate candidate, what kind of things are you looking for? So I guess this is your chance to interview one. As to what's your guide, or what are you looking for in a candidate?
What would be the top three of your platform that you would say would be most important to you as far as making the change that you want to make?
Well, the easy one is constitutional rule of law, because that affects everything. I'm the only one even putting that on the ballot. So the idea that we should be, one of the first things I would do would be, I've got a resolution written up. The Republican Liberty Caucus adopted it as part of their national platform a few years ago. So it's not something, this isn't just me. There are a lot of people who really want to just do the law, and they want politicians to keep their oath of office. I mean, all soldiers, all police officers, all politicians, all new citizens, they all swear to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And the idea that we have domestic threats to our Constitution is something that I'm the only guy who's saying, let's just do this law.
So now, that's what you're calling your reboot on your platform.
Yeah, and yet on your WordPress site, wedeclare.wordpress.com, you're saying that the rule of law reboot is a resolution that's reaffirming that the U.S. Constitution is a civil law contract and is to be obeyed as written. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great idea. In fact, as I was researching you, I started reading through all of these different points, and I was like, yeah, I like that. Oh, I like that too.
Well, I'd like to take credit for all of that, but those things have been written down for a couple hundred years, mostly.
Yeah.
So the idea that the people who wrote these words, they were reading Cicero, and they were looking at historical precedents, and they were kind of reading their time and their circumstance. They just beat the global superpower,
right? They were
with practically no government. They were the Articles of Confederation were they failed. Yeah. And it really wasn't working as a federal government, and yet they still beat the global superpower, and they were still becoming quite a force economically speaking.
They had kind of gone back to what you talked about earlier with civilizations have a 100% failure rate, and they were looking at that, and they were writing this document, how can we make sure that our civilization, our country that we are building does not have a failure rate.
And that's the sustainable. They had this vision of sustainability through limitation of powers and separation of powers and opposition of powers. All of the stuff that we've turned against, when we're talking about like eliminating township governments and that kind of thing, we're talking about concentrating more power and more money into fewer hands.
We're sending it up instead of sending it down.
It's exactly.
Yeah, that's
always been disastrous. Like consolidating schools increased cost when they were promising it was going to decrease costs. And so every time we do that, we're missing the point. Even businesses do this. When you're talking about government power with guns and clubs and jails, it's worse. It's much worse. But even businesses understand that they get too big at a point. They have to divest businesses. They have to get back to their core competencies. They have to, they have to do things.
Well, they just get too big to fail, and then the government can bail them out, right? That's how it works, isn't it?
Well, it's supposed to work. Is that if you screw up, you fail, and hopefully you learn from that and you move on. And that was supposed to be the scientific design of government. I mean, remember this when these guys wrote the Constitution. I'm really getting far away from your question, but
it's not unexpected.
But I know. Anyway, the whole point here was that these guys were part of this explosion of science, and you had real scientists that were showing up to the Constitution Convention. So you had some serious thinkers that were talking about a sustainable form of government that was all about experimental units called states, where they have their own powers to do things.
Yeah.
Other states could look at and say, wow, Indiana's doing something interesting. Maybe we should try that. But now we have this federal government that says, no, you can't do that because we determine everything from central planners like actually even China's not. China in the 1980s, they stopped being a socialist government. When they allowed personal property, they cut corporate tax rates 80%. They allowed people to actually keep the profits of their business. And you see what's happened to China ever since then. So you have these socialist, communist governments who wake up and say, this isn't going to work. We don't want to go the way of the USSR. We have to do something different. And what do? They essentially go back to what we're abandoning.
Yeah. It seems like that's the trend within the global economy, the global governments, I guess. Mm-hmm. It seems like everybody else adopted these socialist policies way before the United States did, and now we've seen the Bernie Revolution.
Well, yes and no. I mean, because actually socialism was born in the United States in its modern form. So, like even in Indiana, where we had the New Harmony, the Owenites, that was 1820 to 1827. And, of course, it failed very quickly, but people still saw that as an inspiring thing. And so you had people like Marx and Engels say, well, let's do that.
Yeah.
They screwed up real bad. It's kind of like, seeing somebody keel over from eating a bad puffer fish, and they say, I'd like what that guy has.
Yeah.
They just cooked it wrong, Andy, that's all.
And so, like everybody always says, well, they didn't do socialism correctly. And that, this Pol Pot fellow, he was in a barrens. He wasn't really, a real socialist. And But my point is, really, I'm trying to get back to your question, and I really do try to answer questions. But when you're talking about, my top 3 things, if we did that one, if you're looking to see what the fallout of that is, our wars are unconstitutional. We have not constitutionally declared a war since World War II. And so if you're reading the Constitution and you see what the powers of the president are as commander-in-chief, when called into the actual service of the United States, that's the actual wording. So he's not even commander-in-chief until there's a declaration of war. And that, like I said, hasn't happened since World War II. And then you see who's the actual commander-in-chief. You read the Indiana Constitution, and you see that's the governor. And so if you're looking at the actual design of our government from the most fundamental expensive levels all the way out, it's unconstitutional. So if we did the Constitution, it's not 3 top things. That's like 1 million top things. So just that one thing, doing the Constitution, would have ripples all the way through our culture from, local all the way. I mean, just think of how...
Now, if we the day you're elected to the Senate, if we decide we're just going to go ahead and move forward with the Constitution as it is, or we're not going to have mass chaos in the streets, the entire government comes crashing down.
I actually hope there would be a little bit of chaos in the streets because, one of the things that, I'm not talking about violent chaos, but one of the things that I think is very destructive to a society is to think that order is the highest goal, when really it ought to be something more like liberty. When you're thinking about what we should be free to have, little chaos, some fireworks, maybe even hold sparklers in your hand against, the Surgeon General's warning or something like that. And so you think about, what ought to happen is we should be excited. We should be having, the same sort of parades and celebratory occasions that people used to have at the end of wars, which we have no experience with.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So, in terms of, what that would actually mean for everybody to do the Constitution as written, you wouldn't see the federal government anymore. Unless you're a pirate or a counterfeiter or something, you're disobeying the law of the seas and the law of nations, which is hard for an individual to do. I mean, you have to be pretty industrious to be breaking. But unless you're doing that, you would not see the federal government at all.
You would see your state and your county government.
You would see people that you could meet in the supermarket.
Yeah, that was number 5 in your WordPress post was a resolution that's reinforcing that in the Constitution is actually written and amended. There are only 7 federal crimes that apply to citizens, which was counterfeiting, as you mentioned, piracy, high seas felonies, and offense against the law of nations, treason, and tax and postal crimes are applied. And that, you basically just hit on that, and that's exactly correct.
Yeah, but the counterfeiting we leave to the federal government now.
Yeah. That's the other thing. We also have this history of, if you follow monetary policy history, monetary systems usually last only 30, 40 years, something like that. So, the English had, they were the last ones who really have a strong global standard of currency. And so if you're talking about reserve currency status, we never got to the level of the British sterling pound. What we did is originally had a gold-backed currency that replaced that, and so we had after World War II in particular, where we had agreements where foreigners, at least if not Americans, could exchange one of these little coupons for gold or silver. And so that's actually in our Constitution, where we're not supposed to make anything but gold or silver coin as money.
And that's why your dollar said a gold certificate.
A gold or silver certificate, right. And so that was like a receipt, whereas, the Federal Reserve note is not a receipt of anything. It's just what they call a fiat currency. And that's really only been in true form, since we suspended the Bretton Woods Agreement and we basically went to a total fiat currency system. That was like 1973.
During the Nixon time.
It was during Nixon.
That kind of hits on the second bullet point here underneath your platform that I have on the show notes is auditing the Fed or banking reform. And you want to restore the constitutional authority of our nation's money to Congress and to the Treasury.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the things that libertarians can all agree on, that our government has a place in.
Well, one of the things that a lot of libertarians get wrong, though, is that they've got this. There is a book that was written, The Creature of Jekyll Island, that got a couple of fundamental things wrong, and that the Federal Reserve System is not an independent private organization, because essentially what it does is it monetizes political debt. And so it is intertwined with our political system. It's not at all an independent thing. It's all the same thing.
Yeah, but for legal reasons, it has to be declared as a private, independent organization.
But it's not.
Right.
And so, the fact that the people who actually met at Jekyll Island wanted to make it an entirely private thing that didn't have anything to do with the federal government. They were supposed to be just what they called the lender of last resort for banks. And so, kind of like what happened in the Panic of 1910, where bankers bailed themselves out, the Federal Reserve System that we think it's supposed to be a private organization, what that would have been would be a truly private organization that has nothing to do with issuing currency, has nothing to do with monetizing, the federal debt. It would have only that banking property of, we have a bunch of money if something really bad happens. Yes. And so it'd be a pool of bankers who would bail each other out if bad things happened.
So another major platform that you have on your website is talking about military reform. Mm-hmm. I would assume that you still have similar views as most libertarian candidates have on declaring wars and not occupying foreign nations for bases.
I know we really shouldn't be. I mean, maybe peace is a bad idea. I don't know. But you're
going to lose a lot of good 60s and 70s songs with that, Andy. You're going to lose all of Buffalo Springfield.
Yeah. But I guess I don't know what we're thinking as far as the whole idea of giving up liberty and security. We know that's a dumb thing to do, but we've done it. And yet we say we're fighting for liberty. We say we're fighting for all this stuff we're not fighting for. And that we know that our government lies to us and has for a very long time. And if you're looking to see how even, there are formal programs for lying to us, like Operation Mockingbird, where they had hired a whole bunch of people who were paid to lie to us professionally. And they did a good job. And so, this is one of those cases where you don't want a government that does a good job in some things like this. And we really
want the normal incompetence that I expect from my government.
I'd rather have that than have some of these.
What do you think the best way to do that in our current situation is? I mean, we have spent decades upon decades becoming the police of the world, the people who are propping up all these different
But are we even
countries.
that? Are we even that? What we really are is we are arms dealers. We arm and train everybody, our enemies and our friends. And so we give weapons to all sides, and we give. Let's just back up a minute. Lawrence of Arabia warned us about this 100 years ago about getting involved
movie,
with.
By the way,
I think I saw it when I was like 3 or something, or 4 or 5 or something like that. But whenever it came out, I saw it, but I haven't seen it since, so I need to watch it. But reading what he wrote about the Saudis and about Wahhabism and what a dangerous sect, this little sect of people that started around the time of our founding fathers. When the Wahhab and the am I really rattling on about this stuff?
No, you're fine.
But anyway,
when Representative Rakita's on, we expect similar stories from him.
Yeah, don't expect that. So when these guys, they militarized a religion, and the Ottoman Empire tried to crush them, and they almost did. But what happened is when the Europeans started fighting back and started wiping out the Ottomans, they decided, let's triangulate again. We don't need to, waste our forces. Let's just get some of these other guys to do our fighting for us. And so they did that, and they picked, people strategically. There's a group of people from Egypt, and then there's the Turks. But then there was this little sect where they were known to be good warriors, and they had oil. And so, they said, well, let's get these guys involved. And we revived this militarized cult of Wahhabism. We revived it. And then we signed agreements with them, after World War I, after World War II, and then with like the petrodollar system in 1973, we've allied ourselves to these people we've knitted ourselves to these people to such a degree that we just gave them the biggest refinery in Port Arthur, Texas, not too long ago. We have been fighting their wars for them. We've been basically in the Middle East doing their bidding ever since 1973.
What would you say to the opponents of that who would say, well, it would be a good idea to get out of the Middle East, but if we left, then thousands of innocent people would die because they would just destroy themselves?
We have made a terrible mess, but we have not been a stabilizing force like we claim we have been. We have been exactly the opposite. If we were to just leave them the heck alone and stop giving them weapons and training and all of that stuff to fight each other, and because remember, like in Syria, we had our CIA-backed forces and our regular forces fighting each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, we have been screwing up so badly over there that if we this is like one of those cases where you take the vice off your head because it's a good idea to do that. And you don't replace it with another one. You stop it.
But 20 years ago, I guess the thought of the people that were in charge, the Bush and Cheney group, was we just move the fight over there and it stays away from here.
Yeah, but has it worked? You can always argue that, yes, well, just think how bad things would be, if we didn't.
If we hadn't.
But, I could argue that my libertarian runs for office have prevented, dinosaurs from returning. You could say, just think of what would have happened. The opportunity costs are it's probably saner to look at what we could have done with all of this money and lives instead of this.
Could have paid off the national debt.
Well, we could have. And so you're looking at some very real fallout in our own country because we think we're doing, we don't want that fight to come over here. But, this is the other thing that really bugs me. How often is it that, a nation moves over to another nation and takes it over across an ocean? It's not easy for these guys who,
especially a radical group that has zero military training and zero Air Force or zero Navy. How could they get over here and bring the fight to us?
And that's a very good question. So what really is the risk?
Yeah.
So these people were fighting each other. And they were no threat to us other than just skirmishes and, individual, there was terrorism, and there's always going to be terrorism. We've had domestic terrorists. We've had, you go to Chicago and you're going to get killed by somebody other than a terrorist.
I made it out just fine out of Chicago.
Well, yeah, Indianapolis is not so far behind. So, you're looking at records,
year over year, Indianapolis is setting crime records.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. So that's embarrassing too. But the point is, wars don't work as advertised, first of all. So all of the promises that we've been made about, well, this, like when Mitch Daniels said this will be an affordable war, or, something along that line, they've never proven to be accurate.
So let's pivot before we run ourselves out of time today, and it gets out of control in a hurry. You'd never know how a podcast could spiral on us. Another major issue that and maybe you're going to say that this has somewhat been dealt with by the Republicans that are in power now, but Obamacare, because with this tax change that came in, the individual mandate goes away. Is that going to? I'm going to ask it. I know what answer I'm going to get. Is that going to solve the healthcare problem that they've created by eliminating the ability to force somebody to pay for it?
No. I work in the healthcare industry. This has been my business forever. What we have done in healthcare is ridiculous. We've basically, through licensing and lobbying and removing all competition, we have basically created a very tight-knit lobbying group that has a monopoly on the delivery of healthcare. Now, I've worked in healthcare my whole life, and it's not so set what healthcare even is. So to say that these people should be doing it and these people should not and all of that stuff is like any other kind of occupational licensing, where it raises costs, it cuts competition, and it makes things difficult. That's been going on for 100-some-odd years. But then during World War II, I'm going to go off on a historical tangent. During World War II, we tied health insurance to employment.
Because we wanted to incentivize people to have. There
were wage and price controls,
right.
And so they had to do something. The ship builders had to do something.
That's what I've heard Rand Paul talk a lot about as well. Yeah. Is what if we took that? We took the stipulation that the metaphor that you used before knits employment and health insurance together, if we took that away, and then all of a sudden the green gecko on the TV is trying to sell you health insurance as well as car insurance.
Well, but then the next point is,
as an
insurance companies
though,
did not want to get involved in healthcare before, because if you crash your car, you can get an estimate, see how much it's going to cost to fix it. If you're sick, that's awfully hard to quantify and say how much it's going to cost to fix it or whether it's going to fix it, because everybody's different and treatments work differently. Medicine is not like fixing a transmission.
And the pricing, I mean, my vehicle, I pay $50 a month roughly for my comprehensive on my vehicle. If I had to pay the COBRA rate for my insurance, the health policy that I have, that's pretty basic. It's an HSA with a high deductible. It would probably cost me $800 a month. That's a tough sticker price.
It is. But then think also, what is it that you really want? You want health care, not health insurance. What's the best way to get health insurance? Well, what's the best way to get anything? What's the best way to get coffee from, all around the world and different roasts, different grinds? What's the best way to get stuff delivered to people? And I think you could see real easily that competition, free market, that stuff works. It works great. Why don't we do that in healthcare? Because we've done everything but. So, kind of getting back to the history of this, when we tied the government to the hip of every doctor, it was with Medicare, and then further and going on with all this coding stuff where we go from ICD-9 to ICD-10, and now we have codes for spacecraft accidents. And for not just getting bitten by a sea lion, but what they call sequelae. So the second time you get bitten by a sea lion, that's a different code than the first time.
It's kind of like the nationwide insurance, or not nationwide, but the American Home warranty. It's where the guy sits down and he says, I need my air conditioning replaced. It broke, and she says, well, air conditions aren't replaced by they're not covered by your insurance, but zombie apocalypses are. It's kind of the same situation.
Yeah, well, anytime you get politicians involved in something, all power is for sale, all of it. So if you give politicians...
Is that how we magically can't... We're the only state in the country that has temperature-regulated beer?
Uh-oh, we dropped...
We unplugged Andy's headphones. Keep going. We'll fix you.
I know. I've been talking too much, and so you're going to unplug me. I know how this works.
That was a warning.
Let me see if I can hear it again. So anyway, the point really is that to do anything right, you don't get politicians involved in it. And so Obamacare was another step in the wrong direction, but it certainly wasn't the first, and it wasn't even really the biggest. It was a big screw-up, and it made things a lot more expensive and complicated. But even before that, we had a lot of stuff.
We could just outlaw health insurance completely.
If we outlawed politicians, it would be even better.
Well, then you'd be a crime.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
It's paradoxical.
So, yeah, it is paradoxical, as is anything. But, the idea that all politics is roughly the same, and that if you get a power to do something to somebody, other people are going to want to rent that power, buy that power, chisel off a piece of it for themselves, and they will find a way to get it.
So what's your solution?
Constitution.
Just go back to not being the federal government's pursuit at all.
I hate to just make it seem like this simple, but the Constitution really, it's like I said, it's not perfect, but it's way better than what we're doing right now. And it's got all the pieces in there. So it's got sound monetary policy, it's got sound military policy for national defense and personal defense. It's got property rights. It's got all that stuff in there if we would only do it.
So let's follow the rabbit hole for somebody who's driving along and doesn't fully understand. If we say we're just going to follow the Constitution when it comes to the Affordable Care Act, that means that the federal government then does not give an incentive to employers for providing health insurance, or that the federal government doesn't require that an individual has health insurance, and then the states are able to make a decision as to what they want to do. And if they don't want to do anything, then it becomes a local, you're the individuals. It's reserved to the individual.
The only arguable federal authority at all in healthcare, and it would still be by extension, would be in Washington, D.C., where, Congress really is supposed to be running that city. And, outside of, like the Navy, if the Navy is operating outside the United States and is under the authority of the United States government by declaration of war, the Army, that kind of stuff, when they're doing if it's constitutional and if they're under the authority of the federal government, then yeah. but none of the rest of us should ever see the federal government at all. So there should be no federal authority in the matters of health care, in education, and, to go down the list. But what that means is that the states would be free to do whatever it is that they want to do, with one important point when it comes to health care. The states don't have any authority to say you can't get health insurance from Ohio here in Indiana. I mean, that would be, like putting a border between, the trade that they're not allowed to do.
It's a legal interstate commerce restriction.
Yes. And so the fact that we already have in place kind of the written built-in rules for trans-state competition, and the federal government is supposed to be a broker of the courts could get involved if there are disputes between the states. And if Indiana decides that, we're going to put a wall around Indiana to keep, Chicago wins out, that might be a good idea. Sorry, no offense. But the point is the federal government could at that point insert itself and say, no, you guys need to work this out. We're going to do something different. That's it. So the federal government has no authority over our health care.
Basically ensuring that there's the most freedom.
And in this case, we're not even talking about freedom because we still are talking about government. So, we have to be clear.
That was the best answer to any question I've ever asked on this show.
Well, I have to make that plain enough because I'm not asking for anarchy here. I'm asking for a governed government. And there's a big difference between, the theoretical anarchists who want to do away with everything and make everything free market and stuff.
The utopian anarchist.
Yeah, and I love the idea. It's pretty. Right. But we're humans. It's not going to happen. And
those are like the Knightstown anarchists from Henry County.
Mm-hmm. Looking at you, Jesse
just
Riddle.
Picking on Knightstown. With the black and yellows down there.
Well, that's not what I'm, at least not in this campaign. I'm not really going for anarchy. No. I never have.
Not this time.
I never have. I've never, it's always been proven, sustainable governed government by law, rule of law. So everybody has to do, the law. Nobody is above the law. So the Constitution, as written, is a leash on politicians, not on us, though. So if you read, what the federal Constitution is real plain about that, where it's got different terms for the states and for the people, and, all of those things are laid out well enough that there isn't any excuse for confusion.
Yeah, I think that's a huge misconception amongst the general populace, the general people who are going out and voting, is that they think that we get our rights and we get our freedoms from the government as it's passed down. We don't, and we get that from the Constitution and whatever. In reality, the government doesn't give us anything. The Constitution is there to ensure that the government doesn't try to
take it away.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're listening to the Boss Hog of Liberty podcast. We are on the We're Libertarians Network, and if it's the weekend, you're probably listening to us on Indiana Talks. We're broadcast Saturdays and Sundays over their network as well. We've got Jeremiah Morrell, Dakota Davis, and Kade Koger are your co-hosts today, and Andy Horning is with us. He's the U.S. Senate candidate running on the Republican ticket, looking for signatures and going to be on the ballot in May. Your first chance of hopefully 2 chances to vote for Andy this year. So you're kind of discussing the campaign and the types of things you've been through. Another major tenet of your platform, as we look on your website, has been trying to eliminate pork and the redistribution of, states send money to the federal government, then they send it back out, and then they, I saw an article today.
I can't believe that Andy Horning wants to get rid of bacon.
No.
Yeah, this is a big pork producing state.
Yeah, I love bacon, but no, that's not. When I'm talking about the corruption of government, what I'm really talking about is that what I've already kind of mentioned, is all this politics is for sale. And you can see it in campaign donations. And that's, I guess, what's, as a candidate, what really gets my goat is that you have 2 things going on. One is you can see what these candidates are going to do because what they've already been paid to do and by whom. So you know what's going to happen when they get to Washington, D.C. because they've telegraphed it. It's, they might as well wear those NASCAR suits that have,
Yeah, they're sponsors.
Yeah, but, in this case, we're talking about major policy changes because of what they got paid to do. The other part to that is that the people who would oppose that kind of system are not going to get that money. So if I'm saying I'm against all of this corruption and I hate the fact that you guys are giving money to candidates and buying policy, well, I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot in getting, $1 million contributions and getting bundlers, to get all of their rich friends and to dump into my campaign. So there are two problems with this. One is that government is being bought and sold. And the other one is that because that's happening, it's kind of silencing all alternative voices.
So something I've kind of talked about to a number of different folks on this show over time. Originally, as designed, we had a federal government that had a House of Representatives that the people got to elect every 2 years. And then we had the Senate, which was supposed to be the cooling pot. And it's become the $100 million campaigns where you don't have a state legislature selecting your senator anymore. You have to go through this process where you've got to run a statewide race with 7 million people in a state. Is this the right way to be doing it at all? Obviously, you're not elected as a senator yet, but they're the only people that get to change this.
Yeah.
Or do we have the right system for even doing these federal elections?
Well, I liked the pre-17th Amendment system better. But I have to say that, when the 17th Amendment was written, it was already fairly corrupt, and the state legislatures were not really doing their job.
They were holding up appointing senators at the time.
And they were doing, there was a lot of stuff going on at the state level because the states had more power, and so their power was all for sale, and they were corrupt as all get out. So I like the idea of senators being the representatives of states to the federal government and looking out for their state. And there are a lot of things I liked about the original design better. But I'm not one of those who thinks that it would be magical to just get rid of the 17th Amendment and go back to, legislatures appointing politicians, because at the heart of all of this, all of the troubles I've been talking about are ones we've chosen. We voted for this. We're where we are because this is where we went. And so to say that, this is just a procedural issue that can be dealt with a procedure, that misses the point that this is a heart issue. And that we need a change of heart and mind as a society if we want to fix the big problems of society. Because they really do come down to that. They come down to personal accountability for your choice. They come down to, selfishness. Whether in this whole game of robbing Peter to pay Paul, do you really see that you're Paul? Or are you imagining that you're Peter? Because that makes a big difference. And if politicians are telling you, no, you're Paul. You are really Paul.
You're my Paul.
You are my Paul. I'm going to give you so much. Then the real issue here is that we are getting lied to and believing the lies and then perpetuating the lies with our choices, and it's all based on heart problems. We're afraid, and so we want to beat up foreigners. We're jealous of our money, so I want you to pay for my health care and I want you to pay for my kids' schooling. All of that stuff is heart and mind.
So we pick it. We continue to choose this over and over again. And you get a guy that's, Pete Wisłowski's been serving since the 1970s. Is that the way this should be set up? Or is that a procedural thing? Should we say you're in Congress for 6 years, then you go get a job, hippie?
Term limits are a good example of something that is a procedural fix that doesn't fix the heart problem. So we're not going to, until we elect people who would give us term limits, we're not even going to get term limits. And if we change our hearts and minds enough to vote for people who are going to give us term limits, well, we already made better choices. So it always comes back to the same thing. I am for term limits because I think we just need term limits. I think the power of incumbency, the power of government is too great. But really, what should be happening is that voters should be getting mad. They should vote like they're mad. Yep. They should vote the way they talk. But
whenever we have voter turnout that's in the 30 percentile range,
I don't mind the turnout. I don't mind that a lot of people stay home because they're probably not doing their homework. They're not. If you don't care, if you're not going to be diligent about this, if you're not going to apply at least the same rigor to hiring a congressman that you would to hiring a janitor, then I want you to stay home, frankly. And if you're going to be thinking about this and researching,
you're starting to talk like a federalist and not a direct democracy kind of guy.
I'm not well, we're not supposed to have a direct democracy, of course.
Nope.
And that's where
it's upsetting to some people locally here when it comes to statute relocations.
I understand. There's that biomass argument that the more people that say this, the more true it must be.
Yep.
It's just come on. That's not scientific. That's not logical, and it's demonstrably wrong. Gangs and mobs are not always right.
I'm sorry. I'm just kind of taken aback here.
That's how they got a monorail on The Simpsons.
Yeah. I mean, he's just sitting here and he's talking, common sense stuff. It's kind of taken me aback. I don't know what to think about all this stuff about, not having a democracy and things like that. That's really shaking me. I don't.
Yeah, I can see you're really desperately shaken there. Yeah. Well, I guess the bottom line of all of this is that, I could say that I've got 3 top issues, and they can be war, whatever, but all of them have the same fundamental problem. And I'd rather just, instead of nibbling at the branches of all of these fast-growing issues, because there are always new issues coming up all the time, why not just strike at the root?
And that's getting back to the federal constitution and the state constitutions. Governing
our government.
One final piece that's been in the news this last week or so, and the reason why the state is holding, not the state, why some of the Republicans have been holding up, and the Republicans, Democrats, I guess I should say together, have been holding up this continuing resolution to extend government is over DACA and over immigration and this big, the border wall and what's going to happen. What's the proper role of government in that? There was a guy that's been in the country for 31 years, and he wasn't a dreamer. He missed the deadline by a year or two, so he got deported.
This is another case where we're attacking and nibbling at these fast-growing branches, and there's so many problems that were created by a few simple fundamental screw-ups. First of all, we give freebies to people luring them in, so they get. They get immunity, they get free health care, they get free schooling, they get all this stuff. They'd be fools not to come here from the places they come from in most cases. Second screw-up is that, because it is so difficult and costly to hire people legally, where you have to pay unemployment compensation insurance and you have to deal with unions and you have to deal with people who, might take you to court over this or that, or, I think he's making a pass at me. I'm going to, if you've made it difficult to hire and fire people legally, you're making it very attractive to hire people illegally. And so all of this stuff comes back to the same fundamental problem where we change our rules around. How does anybody know what the rules are going to be from one president to the next? And so when you're talking about these DACA, somebody's been here for 30 years. I hear all the talk where they say, he should have applied for citizenship a long time. But he was afraid he was going to get deported at any minute. He was afraid that the laws were going to change and that he was going to be out on his keister or something. And, who knows? But I understand why they would want to lay low and want to keep out of the eyes.
You just want to stay off the radar.
You want to stay off the radar because you don't know what's going to happen, because nobody knows what's going to happen. You can't predict. And so because we don't have stable laws, they can't predict what's going to happen. They're going to hide. And so look at all the problems we have created that make it very attractive for people to come here, aside from the fact that things like the war on drugs and the wars we're promoting in their countries are making their homes, what our president calls a poopy hole.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. We have screwed up these people's countries. We really have. We've screwed them up. Our CIA operations where we're taking out a dictator and then putting another one back in, or we're running guns and we're running drugs and we're paying for CIA operations by selling drugs. All of that stuff has fallout to those people. And they're going to want to come here to get all of our free stuff, and they're going to get a job, and they're going to see more money here than they've ever seen in their whole life, and they're going to be able to send money back to their families. It works out great for them, and they're stupid not to come here.
Yep, that's just took the words right out of my mouth. That's what I've always told people whenever we have this conversation about borders. And I come from the construction industry, so I've worked around a lot of immigrants that came from Central America, from Mexico, places like that.
I
And
thought he was going to say from Kentucky. I really did.
No, I never worked with somebody from Kentucky.
No, we don't deal with those
I wouldn't
people.
stoop down to that level. No, but they are. They would be stupid to come here legally. I mean, with everything that the way it is, I mean, sometimes it can take up to 20 years just to get your citizenship here. I mean,
well, with the recent tax changes, meaning that my youngest son is now not going to be, he's not going to be a tax deduction any longer. I've been thinking about maybe saying he's a Mexican, because just think of all the stuff you can get out of that. Then but that's the problem. Yep. I mean, do you see what the problem really is?
That's kind of the thing that I've always talked about whenever I talk to anarchist people within the liberty movement, and they always want to talk about open borders. Well, government can't restrict people from moving freely. That works okay in a place where we aren't, spending money, giving away all this stuff. Like it's that works fine in a situation where it's a perfect world. It's just like we were talking about before with the anarchy utopia, the things that work good whenever people aren't actually human.
Well, there's a lot to argue with any of that, but because facts kind of bear out the fact that we're really not losing money on these people, and that it really isn't a problem economically speaking that a lot of people make it out to be. But the fundamental issue is still the same. Is that if we're talking about building a wall because we have problems with illegal aliens, we're not looking at the problem that we created.
That's not the root cause.
That's exactly right. And that's why I always try to look for the root cause instead of, the symptoms of it. We're treating symptoms, but we never attack the disease.
Yep, exactly.
Well, very good. Well, we'll leave the interview portion of the program there. We'll come back to Andy for final thoughts in a few minutes. We did tease at the beginning of the show, talking to Kade about the late breaking news and what you were covering tonight. Mm-hmm. Some background: you served, and you and I both were recruited by the questionable Darren Jacobs, the planning commissioner, who's exiled all chickens out of Spiceland, Indiana. Darren recruited us to serve on a committee,
steering committee,
a steering committee.
Yep.
As Henry County, any area in Indiana that has a planning commission has to have a comprehensive plan. Mm-hmm. So by law, if they have this, it has to exist, and they hadn't updated it in 20 years. So they said they're going to update the comprehensive plan. We were each recruited to be a part of the steering committee, so we attended a series of meetings, and today was the day that plan was rolled out to the planning commission.
Planning commission, yeah.
So tell me about the night. Did it get adopted? Where's it at? What's the story?
So we opened up the night. The American Structure Point was the company that we hired to come up with this plan with us through the steering committee, and then the focus groups that we had with stakeholder meetings. After we came up with the plan over the last year and so many months, we came up with a final plan that they presented to the Planning Commission tonight. The Planning Commission, after going through it, they had some of the steering committee members got up and talked about it, and we talked about the process, what we went through, as much as how much we discussed it, all the different aspects, kind of what everybody contributed to the plan, and that we all felt as a whole that we supported the plan as it was written. And then the Planning Commission opened up the floor for an hour for any other questions or concerns, and for the hour we had a lot of people come up. Of course, we've got an ongoing issue in the county with wind energy, and we've got a few companies that are looking at our county, to come in and put industrial wind turbines. So it's been a kind of a hotbed issue. And,
it's been the Henry County has turned into the Hatfields and McCoys over wind.
It's really driven a wedge.
Not really just a hotbed issue; it's been the issue.
Yeah, it's taken over a lot of meetings, and
we don't have Republicans and Democrats. We have pro-wind and anti-wind in the county at this point.
It's stifled a lot of progress in the last year. But anyway, after we had the hour of listening to questions and concerns, they motioned to accept the plan as written, excluding page 82 and 83, which have to deal with the wind energy proposal, which in the plan itself, they're questioning whether it was worded as favoring wind. And I agree, it shouldn't say that it favors or that it totally excludes the possibility of wind. It should just, whatever they come up with to say whether we, are open to the idea or not. it still should have something in there that says which way that the county wants to go with it. So until February, the next meeting, all of the planning commission members are supposed to have a say in how they're going to change the language in that.
So it's a stay tuned.
So, yep, stay tuned.
All right. Interesting. Well, thanks for going tonight. We appreciate you giving the update.
Yep.
So the late-breaking arm of the We Are Libertarians Network for Kade. So I appreciate you going. I was not going to be able to make that and let a dog out and eat dinner and get ready for the show tonight, too.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're at the point in the show where we typically go around and do some final thoughts and anything we missed, Andy, as far as a platform or anything along those lines. If not, it's a great time to pitch how to help with the campaign, how to volunteer, how to get signatures.
That's what I ought to do. I mean, you get the idea that I'm about the constitutional rule of law, and I just read the constitutions, and you'll see what I've annotated constitutions. They're on my website. They're on my blog site, so you can see exactly what I think about any particular issue. But if you want to ask me a question, I'll answer it specifically. Probably a really long answer too. So I guess the way to help right now, we can think only about getting the ballot signatures. We have to get that done. And if we have to pay some people to do it or whatever we need to do, give us a ring. If you can help, if you can get some signatures in your county, we can handle the rest of it if you want to just mail us what you get, or if we can come and pick it up, or whatever the case is. But we've got on my website, which is horningforindiana.com, or you can also see them on my Facebook page. You can download a kind of a pre-filled in there's a form that you have to use that's got the name of the candidate and all that stuff already pre-printed in. And then there are 10 signature lines. So each one of these, it's a two-sided form, but it's got only one side where you have to fill out the signatures and the information. If you can print those out and get some people to sign them, that would really help us a lot.
Okay.
Very good. And how do people connect with the campaign? Go to the website, find you. I guess you have a Facebook page for the campaign or a Twitter account.
Facebook page. I'm pretty easy to find. If you just Google my name, you'll see lots of entries now. So I come up right up on a Google search for my website.
Yep, there we sure go. Does because I Googled him today.
Oh, good deal.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Andy, for joining us today. We really do appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.
A couple more final thoughts around the room. Kade, you got anything else? I know your big podcast came out with Brett Bittner. Beyond the Fork, or Churning Sporks, or whatever his show's called.
Yeah.
You can't outrun the fork.
You can't outrun the fork. So we can plug that. Is there anything else going on in the world we need to look out for you on?
I don't think so. If you guys want, you can add me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram @TheArmedFarmer.
How about trying to buy some Advocare products from your wife?
My wife. We sell Advocare stuff, so if you guys want any Spark or anything like that, we got you hooked up.
Kate is now my Spark dealer.
Is it bad that I don't even know what this is?
It's kind of like a weight loss supplement type thing.
Okay, I need that.
So I had surgery last March on my knee, and since then I started diet and exercise, and I've lost 108 pounds since then. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. Kate's blown us away. The Beyond the Fork thing is real. If you want to hear that story, listen to him on the Bittner cast.
What and you're still losing weight, like the Beyond the Fork, or you can't outrun the fork episode.
Yeah, that's kind of the first leg of my weight loss, and I've kind of switched tactics now, and I'm still going with it.
Well, you lost 93 pounds since then. Now you're saying 108.
Yep.
So I mean, you're still going strong, like hardcore.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's pretty awesome.
Oh,
Thanks.
Congratulations!
Yeah, thank you.
Holy cow, that's a lot.
Yeah, you can't tell he was even fat at one time now. He just looked regular.
I feel much better, too.
I still show that I'm overweight. I'm down 42. You can't hardly tell.
Wow.
Yeah.
I need to get whatever this is you guys are doing. So
yeah, it's the Henry County groundwater. It's wind-free. Dakota, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Man, I had it all in my head, but now I can't remember. I guess man, I really can't remember.
All right.
I had a great thing. Oh, I know what it is. It's our new links that we can get for the Boss Hog of Liberty YouTube page. So if you've made it this long and you're watching the YouTube video, then you can click. The circle is going to be right in front of Andy, right over there, and that will take you directly to our Boss Hog of Liberty site on YouTube, and makes it really easy for you to subscribe. We only need 13 more people, and we'll get 100 subscribers. And then right here in front of Kade is going to be the latest episode that we did, which was discussing the GOP Senate for the state's new platform.
All right, very good. I wanted to just take a minute or two and read into the record that Amazon.com had their list of top 20 cities for their HQ2, their new headquarters, potential to bring in 40,000 new jobs and I think a $5 billion project. I think there's 33 buildings in the campus in Washington. The Indianapolis Star, which you're very familiar with, they got rid of all of their editors and copywriters. Andy, if you look at this, it says Indy is a finalist for the Amazon headquarters, but they spelled Indy INDIY. So the 12-year-olds that were quick to break the news
somebody
down
was
there.
going to try to write Indianapolis, and then an editor was like, no.
Just make it
Indy. They're like, okay.
So yeah, possibly the biggest story in a generation in Indianapolis, and that is the headline that they put out. So I just wanted to maybe they want to reconsider not having anybody work there. I swear, the Indianapolis Star. I tell Dakota this all the time. They literally read tweets. Whatever's on Facebook and Twitter, they just make it a news article now. If something's going on or if there's a meme that's popular, they literally have a 17-year-old that works there that takes it and prints it out, and they just print out Twitter for the internet.
Good for that 17-year-old. He's getting some good work and life experience. Maybe he's going to get a good job at CNN someday.
And someday maybe he'll learn how to spell Indy when you're working for the Indy Star. So anyway, but that's a bigger story, though, this Amazon campus. And I'm interested in your input, Andy, or if you have any thoughts on it. If you had been elected governor at some point, there'd be companies coming to you with their hand out saying, hey,
there's the question, isn't it? What are we offering them? And then how much is it going to cost
but
us?
It's a secret. We don't know because the state keeps it all closed.
We're going back to pork and banning bacon.
Yep, and everybody knows that's the rule right now. So they know that if they've got a big tasty thing they're willing to bring us, that although I got to say it's always kind of worked like that. It's not like there's ever been a time where people didn't say, well, I can bring a bunch of jobs to your place with my railroad coming through here. So it's not like it's brand new, but where the stakes are so much higher right now is that we used to small business is still the biggest generator of income and wealth at the individual level. So small businesses are still the thing you really want to stimulate. Big businesses can go up real fast, but then they can also go down real fast, and you lose a whole town. So it's dangerous. It's another one of those dangerous games we're playing with all of this.
And at the same time, you feel almost derelict in your duty if you're Governor Holcomb, or if you're, where you've got, you're one of 20 now.
How do you say no to 50,000 jobs and $5 billion in revenue?
Well, it's not even just saying no to 50,000 jobs. It's saying that somebody's going to do it.
Right. Somebody's going to do it. Why not us?
Yeah.
Wisconsin, and it's controversial, they gave out $4.3 billion in state incentives to attract Foxconn, which is 13,000 jobs.
And so, if you look to see what the property tax rolls look like here in Indianapolis, where people are losing their houses all the time because they can't pay their taxes, you're seeing a hidden price to everything our government does. So when people are losing their businesses, losing their houses, losing everything they've got and ending up having to live off the state, that's one of those things. We never think about that as being a cost of government operations, but we really ought to.
Right. You never own your house.
Never own your house.
That's
There's
right.
nothing you own that can't be taken away by government right now, and that's a shame.
That's the I know Rex Bell got it from somebody else, but he always challenged people to say, name 3 things the government doesn't tax or regulate. Can't do it. Just, you can't get there.
Black market. That's really it.
But they're trying to regulate that.
Yeah.
They're just inefficient. So anyway, we appreciate everybody listening, following the podcast. The way we grow is by your subscriptions. Like us on Facebook, share. If you haven't yet, jump on that YouTube page and like us there. We are discussing the possibility of making some upgrades to the equipment around here. So if that's something you're interested in helping us out with, and you've listened this far, we know you're one of the hardcores. Send us a message, Dakota or myself, or direct message the page. Looking at the possibility of doing a Mevo camera, which will give us full high-definition video, and then continue to do the YouTube streams the way we are. Yep. we ran into a little issue a couple weeks ago where Facebook and YouTube were not playing nicely together, and you couldn't export YouTube, videos out of Facebook for a while. So those went down for a couple of weeks. They're back now, but we want to be in control, so we're looking at some hardware.
I can get the videos uploaded to YouTube now, but for some reason it takes forever.
Yeah.
And I'm trying diligently to get that worked out. We're trying to, I just called our fiber company here in Newcastle, Metronet, so they're going to be coming out on Monday, setting me up with the gigabyte speed internet. So we're trying to do some studio upgrades and could really use the help with that.
We're on 2.0. If you guys are interested, let us know. And there's sponsorship opportunities as well, especially for Henry County businesses. So if this is something you might be into, we want to talk.
Yep, we'll post the link to the GoFundMe page on the Boss Hog of Liberty Facebook page, or you can just go to GoFundMe and just type us in the search bar, and we'll be there.
There we go. And we want to give a shout out to Andy as well for wearing plaid. He got the memo, and this has become the Flannel and Plaid podcast, and we're all in it today. So the picture is going to look great. We'll see you all in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Get our other shows at WeareLibertarians.com.